Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
I've been doing this podcast since September of 2012, and boy, are my lips tired.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Anne-Marie is not going to join us this week, but I have a guest joining me today on this Memorial Day 2025. Her name is Jen Wilt. She describes herself as the map maker of hope, and there's a whole story behind how that came about, which we're going to find out about in a minute. But somehow there seems to be an appropriate piece of that because a great many Americans, here in the U.S., this is the day where the official federal holiday says we're going to appreciate those who have defended our country throughout the years, throughout all the various wars and so forth. And in the process of doing that, of course, we deal with a rather somber topic. Well, that kind of points to the fact that people live with various kinds of somber topics in their daily lives, year in, year out, month in, month out. As our guest did, as so many people have experienced throughout their lives. And so it's kind of appropriate that we're talking about this on a day where this is a major focus here in the United States. So Jen, first of all, welcome to the program. How are you doing today?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I am doing great. It is beautiful here in West Virginia, so it's an absolutely gorgeous day.
West Virginia. I used to live in Virginia, not so far away from you. Yeah.
Not so far. No, sir.
You're a little bit more mountainous, but other than that.
That's pretty much very similar. That's exactly right. So it just depends on what side of the mountain you're on. So.
That's it. Exactly. So I kind of gave a very brief overview of where you come from on this, but why don't you give us the more deeper background, because you went through kind of a traumatic period in your life, and it really set you up for what you're doing now. So give people an idea of what that is all about and what happened.
Sure, absolutely. So I decided back in August of 2003 that I was bored and I wanted to travel and do things. So I thought, hey, why not join the military? And so my uncle,
Memorial Day.
Yeah, exactly. And so my uncle retired from the Air Force. And so I went and talked to him about it. And, he gave me the runaround. He took me to the local Air Force base where he lived. And I said, let's do it. And I went and talked to a recruiter, and 2 weeks later, I was in basic training. So It went that quick. So
they didn't waste any time. I give them credit for that.
I did not. But you know what, though? I knew if I had waited, I would probably have talked myself out of it. So I thought, you know what? Let's just go. And, I remember calling my parents and say, hey, I'm leaving today. And wham, bam. I was out the door. So by that evening, I was in San Antonio, Texas. So, but I ended up really loving the military because I am ADHD. I like my routine, and the military is nothing but routine. So it was great for me. And so I, like I said, I went in the military, did basic training, went to tech school, all that stuff. And I ended up getting stationed in Charleston, South Carolina, which was great for me because I was 9 hours from home.
Oh,
so I could hop in a car and drive home. So that was great. And so I was really enjoying it. We were working, 12-hour shifts, 5 days a week. We were also right in the middle still of a war. So we were constantly working. And I was grateful because I had a couple of the guys that I went through. Well, there was one guy I went through basic training and tech school with, which was great. And he lived directly below me. And then there was a couple other guys that I met in tech school that we all got stationed together. So that was really great.
And that's interesting. You don't normally get that kind of assignment in the military. How that
out? Well, you saw it when you go through MEPS to go into the military. You get to pick 5 different jobs that you would think you like to go into. And if you weren't sure, you could just pick undecided, but I definitely picked a couple things. And that was why I went to basic training so fast, is because they needed people to fill the roles in air transportation, which is what I did. Okay. And so, yeah, so it was like bam, 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 bam. And yeah, like I said, we were working all the time because we were one of the only bases that was able to get everything over to Iraq, because there was a Air Force base in California that had caught on fire. So half their stuff came to us. And then Dover, which was up north, that's where like Air Force One flies out of and things like that. They had their warehouse collapse. So we were working. Yeah, we had to turn our parking lot into a graveyard. So
you were busy.
We were very busy. So we were constantly sending supplies and people over to Iraq. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. We started making, like, me and my friend group, if you will. We started making friends with other people that were in our squadron. And unfortunately, one of the people that we became friends with also became my rapist. So,
oh dear.
Yeah. So we were all went out one night, and there was some drinking involved. And we all went back to our friend's house because he was the only one that lived off base. All the rest of us still lived in the dorms. And that was when everything happened. And something that I think is really important to this story is that one of the reasons I believe that so many sexual assault victims aren't believed is because sometimes we don't fight back. But what people don't realize is that that's not always an option. Yeah. And I'll get back into that later. But to me, it literally felt like my soul was on fire. I don't have any other way to describe it. I remember just like willing myself, like scream, run, do something, and I could not move. Like could not move. I felt like I was completely paralyzed. And I mean, because I remember specifically looking at that door, like, why isn't anything happening? And it, like, I equated to like feeling like you're buried alive, but you're not. You're just stuck in your body. Yeah. And so it was very traumatic. And I remember just laying there the whole rest of the night, and I just could not move. I never slept, nothing. And then, in the morning when he finally moved, that I got dressed, and then I went downstairs. Like all of our friends were downstairs. And so, yeah, so that was part of the reason I just kept thinking, why didn't you scream? Why didn't you do something? Because I physically couldn't. And so, yeah, so it was a big divide. It was really ugly. Later I ended up attempting suicide. And literally, when I tell you the only reason I'm still here is by an absolute miracle. I ended up, and I'll just give a trigger warning in case anybody's sensitive to suicide or anything like that. But I was on they had put me on 3 different medications, SSRI and SNRI and Ambien to sleep, which, for starters, I was on too high a dose. There's a 5 milligram dose and a 10 milligram dose. They immediately put me on 10 milligram. Well, I was like 114 pounds. Oh, dear. I'm 5'1". Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, it would knock me out so bad every single night. Oh, I'm telling you, it was awful. And, but I didn't know anything about medication then, nothing. They said, take these. I did. Yeah. And yeah, so I ended up taking, I just got all my prescriptions filled, and I took every last one of them. So 90 pills, 30 of which were, what do they call it? Sedative. What do they call that thing? I can't remember. Ambien. But anyway, Ambien's a sleeping medication, obviously, and it's a very, very strong one. Yeah. And I mean, it's a controlled substance. And so, like I said, I was already on too high a dose. Just
Right.
taking 30 of those would have been enough to kill me.
Mm-hmm.
But I took 90 pills. And then on top of that, which, praise the Lord, the Army and the military and the Air Force, I mean, every branch of the military, if you are in the dorms, you are not allowed to keep your weapon with you.
Oh, okay.
Which we didn't carry weapons anyway, but my suite mate, she was military police. So if they didn't have that rule, she would have had one. And I'm telling you, I would have figured out a way to get in her room and get it.
Yeah. I get it.
Yeah. And so thankfully that's not the case, but to make sure that I died, because that was my goal. I mean, this wasn't looking for attention. This was, I honest to goodness wanted to die. Because I remember at one point thinking to myself, hell cannot be as bad as what I'm going through.
Yeah.
Nothing can be as bad as this. And so I borrowed an X-Acto knife from one of my friends. And, you know, typically X-Acto knives are super, super, super sharp.
Right.
But for some reason his was not.
Oh,
and
really?
I remember, yeah, thankfully, but I remember digging at my wrist. I even tried to do my throat, like everything. It was really bad. And, but a buddy of mine, the same buddy that I borrowed the X-Acto knife from, he just had a funny feeling that he needed to come check on me. And he said later, it was just something in my eyes that he was like, something's off there. And so he came down to my room. Well, the one thing I had forgot to do was like lock my door. That was the one thing I forgot to do. And so he walked into my room and he saw me laying on the ground and he saw blood and he of course, you know, and he sees the pill bottles. And so he immediately calls 911. And so from the time that I did all that to the time that I was in the ER was less than an hour, because the hospital that was closest to base was literally just like 2 miles off of base.
Okay.
It was really, really close. And so they were there quickly. I was at the ER quickly. And I remember just coming in and out. I remember catching bits and pieces. And so I remember later waking up and there was what we call a CID, which is basically just, it's a military detective, if you will, who was sitting in the corner of my room. And there was also a nurse in my room. And I don't remember if he even said, how are you feeling? How are you doing? I don't remember any of that. But the one thing I remember is him saying, what did you do with the pills? And I said, what? And he said, what did you do with the pills? He said, we tested your urine. We took your, we drew your blood. We checked your trash can. We checked your toilet. We checked everywhere. And we could not find the pills. And I said, I don't, what do you mean? I said, and I told him exactly where I was sitting, where I dumped them all out. I said, I'm sure you could dust whatever. I said, why do you think? I said, I'm confused because I took all the pills. So what do you mean? And he said, no. He's like, we tested your body. There's not a single trace of any medication.
Wow.
In your system. And I remember I couldn't get around it. And I just was just like, I don't understand. Like, I don't understand why you don't believe me, all this stuff. The sweet little nurse that was in my room, I remember her touching my hand and she said, I believe you and I'm going to put you down in my little book of miracles.
Wow.
And I was so grateful for her in that moment because I was really, really upset.
Yeah, sure.
And then I remember them telling me that my parents were on the way down, but they ended up, I had to go to a rehabilitation place after that. It's the same one I'd already gone to when this sexual assault occurred. Because they sent me there right after that had happened too. And then they released me to my parents until it was time for the trial. And so, and I remember not wanting to press charges because I just wanted to like forget it and pretend like it didn't happen.
Yeah,
but I remember, and I remember the military police person that had taken my statement, her telling me that her sister had been sexually assaulted and that she originally felt the same way, but later she decided that she was going to go ahead and press charges, and she was glad that she did. It gave her a little bit of closure and things like that. Well, that didn't happen for me. And I went through the trial, even though I didn't want to. I was really proud of myself because I remember getting through the testimony. I was the only woman in there, the only one. It was all men. The judge was a man.
That's crazy.
Defense team, everybody, all men. The only other woman was my victim's witness advocate, and she was a wonderful person. And I remember my mom's just sat outside because she's like, I can't be in there. And I didn't want her in there anyway, because I didn't want her to hear all of that. And but so I did all of that, and then they let me separate after I did the trial. And 2 weeks later, I take a phone call from my victim's witness advocate, and she says, "You're going to want to sit down." And I said, "Okay." And she said, they didn't press any charges against him.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, my world, if it wasn't shattered before, it was immediately shattered then. Because to me, that said that the truth doesn't matter. I don't matter. Like, what's the point? And then, so then I decided, I went from the only place I wanted to be was home. I remember the whole time when I was going through all of that after the sexual assault was just wishing I was home with the people who love me. I went from wanting that to wanting to be nowhere near the people that love me, because I thought, I'm a liability. Like, I shouldn't be around. Like, nobody should love me. Like, obviously it was my fault somehow. Yeah. I mean, it was bad. And so I did. I ran away from home basically for a couple of years, but thankfully I met some wonderful people along the way. You know, I decided to move to Louisiana to live with my ex-boyfriend who was in the Army, who had just came back from Iraq.
Wow.
So you're putting PTSD and PTSD together. It was like putting
that's a great
oil and
combination.
vinegar. It was terrible. But thankfully, though, through him, I met some really wonderful people. One of my best friends ever, her name's Alicia. Shout out to Alicia. Still friends with her. I just got to see her last August. So, but yeah, some wonderful people met with me along the way. I lived down there for 2 years. And then I finally decided, you know what? I think I'm ready to go back home. And so I did. I met my husband, who is wonderful. He's the best thing ever. And we got married. And then several years later, we started having kids. And but yeah, so there, you know, there was some more stuff in between there, but that's pretty much where I am now.
Right.
But, you know, I wish I could say that my mental health journey ended when I moved to Louisiana. That would be really
nice, but it's not likely.
It would be beautiful, but it did not. When I tell you, I joke around that, like, if you open up a random page in the DSM, like, there's going to be something I've been diagnosed with on that page.
So you basically say your picture appears over and over again in the DSM. That's essentially.
Yeah. Okay. Reoccurring theme.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, man. But thankfully, my husband is no quitter. He is no quitter. And I always joke around that if I had been married to any other man, they would have left. For sure, would have left. And I wouldn't blame them. But he's like, nope, we're going to figure this out. He found me a therapist. Actually, with the vet center at the time, I wasn't, I didn't have any disability with the VA. But that I later did get with that therapist that my husband set me up with. Wow. Okay. Which was great. Yeah, because I mean, I was suffering. I couldn't hold down a job. I was a mess. And it was like this vicious cycle. It was like things would be, I had the upturn and things would be going well. And then something triggering would happen. And I hit rock bottom, lose my job, like the whole cycle over and over and over again.
That's what I call the roller coaster.
Yep, exactly. And so I was pregnant with my son at the time when I started seeing her. And then we went through the application process and all that stuff to get benefits. And thankfully I was approved. And so praise the Lord, I've got free health care for the rest of my life, which is amazing. but I was still suffering pretty badly. And thankfully, once I got on with the VA, then I started seeing another therapist. And so I was very eager. Like, I wasn't somebody who had mental health problems that actually didn't want to fix them. I just wanted you to, give me something and let me go. Like, I was eager and willing to do whatever it took. Obviously I had a child on the way. Like, I didn't want to leave this burden onto them.
So you were motivated. So you're saying.
I was very motivated. And so my new therapist, she said, well, you know what, let's try something. It's called CPT. It's like cognitive behavioral therapy, but it's called cognitive processing therapy. And it's more, detailed, maybe, is what I'm looking for, but like, it's 12 weeks. It's a 12-week program that you go through. Like, you meet with your therapist every single week. You have homework you have to do. And you have to do your homework, and it's very, this is how it's going to go. We're going to get through this, but it's awesome. I mean, it is a fantastic therapy. The VA is really big on it, but it's very, very good. But so one of the things, I think it was like week 5, she said that I needed to write out my trauma from beginning to end. And there was one part where I kept getting tripped up, and it was the part where I didn't fight back.
Okay.
And so I remember, like, I'm just like, can't get through this. I'm stuck right here. And I remember my husband's like, well, let's go to bed. And then maybe, fresh perspective in the morning, new day, you can try to get back going. And I'm like, okay, well, I had this thought, like, I can't be the only person that's happened to. Like, surely I'm not the only one. So I looked up, like, feeling like you're paralyzed when, sexual assault, things like this. Turns out there is more than one, or should I say more than 2 stress responses. It's not just fight or flight.
Okay.
There's actually 4, but the other 2 are freezing and fawning. Now, fawning applies more to like childhood trauma or complex trauma, things like that. That's not really applicable to like a one-time traumatic event, but it talks about the freezing response. And like, have you ever seen a goat when they get scared and they it's like they get rigor mortis, and that's exactly what's happening to us. And it's basically like your body. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. It's like playing dead. And so your body, your brain will decide that that's the only option for us in that particular moment. And so it basically shuts your body down to divert all the necessary resources to your brain, so it can, strategize and figure out how we're going to deal with this. And the blessing of it, though, is that, like, when I look back, I didn't feel any pain. Like, I felt no pain. At the time, I did not realize that was a blessing. But knowing other sexual assault survivors and people who have fought or people who've tried to run and things like that, I didn't have to go through what they went through. And so, you can look at it now, hindsight being 2020, what a blessing that was. Yeah. And exactly. But, I remember reading that, and it said like 73% of all sexual assault victims experience some form of this freezing response, or what they call. Really? Yeah. It's actually called tonic immobility. But yeah. And I was like, what? And I remember crying. I've never cried like that. So to this day, it's the only time I've ever cried.
Oh, it really touched you deep down.
Oh my gosh. I remember just like almost hyperventilating. I was crying so hard. My husband's like, what the heck is happening? I'm, like, I'm trying to say happy tears, and I'm just crying. And I realized, well, at first I was pissed because no one had ever talked to me about this. No one. Sure. Not a therapist, not a psychiatrist, no one. And so like all the times I share my story and no one told me that this was even a thing.
Well, they probably didn't even know.
Right. And then or it just didn't cross their mind maybe at the time. But then, and then I was like, oh my gosh, this changes everything. Like this changes, like, it's not my fault. It wasn't my fault. It was never my fault.
Sure.
And it literally that night, it was May 24th, 2019.
Okay.
I'll never forget it for the rest of I remember staying up, like journaling that whole night, like all these like thoughts that had come to me and all these things. Yeah. And it was like I had a wall.
Yeah.
Like up around my heart and my brain for so long. And it was like that wall came down and I started connecting dots that I hadn't connected before and things like that. Sure.
It was a breakthrough.
And it was a major breakthrough. And thankfully I had therapy the next day.
Okay. Perfect.
And so I went to therapy and I told her exactly what I was going through or what had happened to me and what I'd figured out and all this stuff. And she said, "Oh, you need to read this book. It's called Waking the Tiger by Peter Levine." And I'm like, she's like, the whole thing is about that freeze response. And I'm like, really? And she said, yeah. And I remember we were going out of town that weekend and I listened to it like on Audible almost the whole way. And I remember just being like having my mind blown, and I cried like the whole way there too, but it was fine. And you
had a lot to release, so that makes sense.
Exactly. And that's basically what the whole book is about. It's about unreleased trauma that you're storing in your body and how it manifests and how it just destroys so many areas of your life. And so once I figured that out, I was like, I wonder how many other people don't know this.
Sure.
And then that set me on a journey. And then I started researching everything I could on the brain and everything I could on different ways of healing, whether that's nutrition or physical fitness or all of these things. And so I like went to town and I was just studying all the time. Like I couldn't get enough. That's like all I wanted to do. And then I remember at one point thinking, I better get some certifications because at this point, I mean, come on. Like that was like it became like my full-time job.
Yeah.
And and we had our son and it was awesome. But then I had a little bit of setback. I did suffer some postpartum depression with him.
Okay.
But I rebounded. And then now we have two now. So I have a little girl too. And thanks. They're 7 and 5, which is just mind blowing to me. But so I went down this whole journey of figuring out how the heck so the thing was, I didn't want to mask my symptoms. Like I had done that for so long. And honestly, that's what mental health care is in this country.
A lot of the time it is. Yeah.
A lot of time, not always. And there's more and more like amazing places popping up who are like holistically trying to help you heal that, which is amazing because that wasn't the case, 20 years ago when all this happened to me.
Yeah.
And so it's come a long way. Well, even the VA, the healthcare at the VA is a million times better than it used to be. I mean, I absolutely love my care team. They are fantastic. Every last one of them.
It's good to hear.
So, oh my gosh, yes. Yeah. Cause when I first got out, it was not pretty, but now it's a lot better. They really revamped it. So, but, so I just, I started doing all this and I started speaking, and it's like every time I would share my story, there'd be at least one person who would say, that was for me. Like you had no idea how much I needed to hear that. And so that really kind of opened the door to public speaking. And then I had somebody reach out to me and said, I don't know if you would be interested in doing this, but would you think about, maybe coaching me and helping me? And I was like, yeah, sure. And so that sent me down the path that I'm on today.
Okay.
But it's just, because like I said, I was not interested in just masking my symptoms for the rest of my life. Like I was really trying to heal. And I could tell you like the three biggest things for me that really, really transformed my healing is one is finding a community of people.
Sure.
Because, the thing that really, like when I would be at my worst, it would be at night when I couldn't shut my brain off.
Yep.
And I would start thinking that I was the only person that was going through this, like that nobody else understood what I was going through, which is a complete total lie. There was thousands upon thousands of people who understood what I was going through.
Mm-hmm.
But they weren't a changeable thing to me. So, I found a community, and that was fantastic. And it makes such a difference when you don't feel alone.
Yeah.
How much that one little thing can just change your whole outlook.
Sure. Connecting to the right persons or the right
exactly
people. It's I don't care what your scenario is, what your situation is, it's always going to make things better. But it has to be the right group. It has to be somebody.
It has to be the right
people
group
who align in just the right way.
Yep. And that, that's the one thing I will say is a blessing about, social media and things like that now. I mean, it's with anything else, there's good and there's bad.
Of course.
But one of the good things is like, you have people that you never would have been able to meet at your fingertips.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not as good as the real thing, but it's still an option, which wouldn't have been an option, 20 years ago.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
And so, that's a beautiful thing about it. And then the next thing for me, and this isn't always the case for everybody, but it's faith. Like, you have to have faith that things can get better. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a religion or anything like that, but it has to be a belief that, okay, maybe things are terrible right now, but I still believe that they can get better. I still think that can happen. Because the thing that I have found is, if you have no faith, then you cannot have hope. And if you don't have hope, that is a terrifying place to be. That's when suicide becomes, it's like the thing that moves you from ideation to action, is that lack of hope.
Sure.
And so, figuring out how we can find that, how we can cultivate hope, where we can find it, what our sources could be, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third thing is nutrition. And people don't associate nutrition with mental health. They do with physical health.
But you're right, we don't.
But I'm like, well, if it's terrible for your body, why would it not be terrible for your brain if you're eating like standard American crap, And so, I mean, that was like the final piece for me. Like, when I actually started changing what I was eating, holy cow. And I've heard people have said to me, like, well, I don't know how what I eat can affect my trauma. Like, my trauma is not going to change. I'm like, you're right. What you eat is not going to change the things that have happened to you, but it can help change the way that you process them.
The way you respond to it. Yeah,
exactly. It's like, and then I go through the whole spiel about neuroplasticity and, you're not stuck with the brain that you have. You're not stuck with it. You can change it.
Yeah.
And, one of the beautiful things is changing the way you eat, and it will help change your beautiful brain. And, so that was the third major piece for me. And it's been a big piece for other people.
It makes a lot of sense, because ultimately you have to find some way to leave behind being a victim, and you can't do that unless you have a way out, unless there's a way to get there.
Right. Exactly. So, but so those have been like the main pillars that I always use in my coaching. But then, we like to get very personal, because, a lot of us share the same symptoms, but not always.
Sure.
And there's some different outliers. And then we're all starting from different places.
Sure.
So, when I give people their map to the place that they want to be, we start with the big three, if you will. But then we start tailoring, tiny little, what I call waypoints. It's the waypoints up the mountain, the step that we need to get to the next step. Like, what do we got to learn here? Or what skill do we need? Or what tool do we need to get us to the next one? And so that's been my approach. And so far it's worked pretty well for everybody. And I'm always adaptable. You have to be when it comes to, well, really you should be with anything, but specifically with mental health, you really got to adapt.
There's no one size fits all. It's just not the way things work, especially when we're all individuals. We're going to have one size fits many, but but not one size.
That's exactly right. Exactly. I mean, that's one of the things that is so great about being a human, is all the things that make us different.
Absolutely. And what keeps life interesting.
And all the cool inventions and things that would come about that, you know, if we were all the same, those things wouldn't be here. So
we wouldn't be here. Life would end.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So, but yeah, so now every day I wake up happy and hopeful, and it's a beautiful thing. You know, I tell my kids, well, especially my daughter, she really struggles with anxiety, and she's got big emotions and processing those. And so we've been working on that. And we actually, a friend of mine, she's a therapist, she's a child therapist. And so we've been going to see her too. And so we've all been kind of working on that. And so that's been really neat to see too, is to see her progression. But, you know, yesterday morning we were talking about, she was upset about something. And I said, well, you know what? You know, this is what we can do about it. But then there's something else. It's like, so are you going to choose? Because you get to choose if you're going to be upset about this all day, or are you going to choose to be happy? Because you get to pick. You get to pick. And if you're going to choose to be happy, how are we going to get there? And so, you know, working that out with her and things like that. But I tell you, parenting is the hardest job in the world, but man, is it the coolest. It is the coolest.
It's also an extension of your experience. I mean, you are experiencing and have been experiencing something that many guests on the show have experienced. I think of one of my co-hosts, Joel Elson, he was a gambling addict and had all kinds of trials and tribulations associated with that. What came out of that, though, was because of his experience, he was able to identify with particularly some young people who had been through horrific experiences through foster and so forth, in a way that they couldn't connect with anybody else, because he'd been through the same kind of crap they went through in a different way, but he went through the same kind of stuff. That level of identification is huge, because when you have that you were talking earlier about the importance of human connection. That's where the connection starts. It's like, we have that in common. Right. So now we can have a conversation.
And that's like, people are always constantly like saying, what's my purpose in life? What's my purpose? And I'm like, well, you could start with taking the biggest tragedy in your life, your biggest pain, and using it to help other people who are going through that same pain.
That's right. Yep. Start
there, because I guarantee you, you will find meaning in that for sure. So,
which, by the way, that fits in with this is my way of expressing it. It doesn't always resonate with everybody, but it's the starting point for how you leave behind being a victim by leaving behind being a volunteer to be a victim. And so, you know what? I'm going to take control of my life now.
Exactly.
Against all the odds, I'm going to do it anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And, you know, getting started, that's the hardest part. You have a hard time, even though you're suffering inside your cloak of victimhood, if you will, even though you're suffering in there, you know it, it's familiar, and stepping outside of it to the unknown, the uncomfort zone, if you will.
Oh yeah.
That's hard for people.
It's
very, very hard.
We've not done it before.
But it's like, exactly. But it's like, you don't know what you're missing till you get out of there. You don't realize how much lighter you feel than once you get out of there. Yeah. Like, I look back sometimes and I think, how was I functioning? Like, I don't know how I was functioning, how I was surviving, but it was
time, basically.
Yes, exactly. And I remember, like, I specifically remember my husband, like, he's type A, like alpha, the whole thing. And I'm definitely not, which is so funny how we like connected. But he is like, you know, we need to set some goals and I remember at one point saying, I can't plan beyond today. Like, I physically cannot do that. So now it's fun to actually get to do those things with him and not be stressed about it, or, you know, to actually plan for the future. But also,
well, he also sounds like, I mean, you were describing earlier about how he's very special to you in your life. And I can begin to see why, because if he comes from an alpha perspective, that can have a strength, but he ties it into another strength that normally is not associated with alpha, which is he has emotional connection going on.
Exactly.
That's a rare combo. You get a lot of alphas
he's a rare breed.
Don't have that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was joke around that the only thing he needs me for is procreation. Other than that, he doesn't need me for anything. Like, he could fix anything, build anything. He could sew. He could cook. Oh, you want to talk about cooking? He won me over. Like, the way to my heart is through my stomach, and that was it. So yeah. but yeah. So I mean, it's been. Sometimes I look back, and I'm like, man, it took so long. I suffered for 15 years. It took so long. But now, today, being where I am, I can look back and be completely grateful for every slow, tiny little step that I had to take. Like, I always joke that I had to climb up a mountain covered in mud, like low crawling. And I would take like a couple steps, move a couple feet, and I'd slide back. And then I'd have to do it again. And it was a slow, repetitive process, but I got there. And I'm very, very grateful for the whole process of where I am now.
And I don't know this for a fact, because I mean, I haven't had a conversation with your husband. I've only talked with you. But I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say that despite what you claimed about how it's a one-sided relationship and you get all the benefit and he doesn't, I think he's getting a major benefit here, because everything you're describing about him tells me, yeah, he does have the alpha background, but he has demonstrated an ability to connect into emotion. And what you're giving him is education about how to do that.
Oh, absolutely.
He's doing it. And that's the rare part, but you're showing him how to do it through your own example.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, I'm guessing, but I'm thinking that that's where he's getting a great deal of benefit from you.
Yeah, I would say absolutely. Yeah, because there's lots of things where he'll ask me questions about, especially when it comes to human connection and things like that. And so we've had a lot of really good conversations.
That's fabulous.
And yeah.
What a great partnership. That really is good.
Oh, it really is. It really is. He's the biggest blessing in my life for sure. And I think about our kids, like, they get the best of both worlds. So
yeah. Not everybody can put that combination together. I mean, I have known people who come from those two different places, and it doesn't work at all. It's oil and vinegar. Oil and water, I guess that's a better way of saying it.
That's for sure.
Work.
That's for sure.
You have to both come at it with a viewpoint that you're really going to get benefit from the relationship, and you are both doing that, and that's why it works.
Exactly. And valuing what the other person needs too. Because, like, my husband's a social butterfly. Like, he wants the more the merrier is his motto. Whereas even though I'm a very outgoing person, especially since I became a parent, like, I need my me time. Like, I don't want to go all the time. He could go. Adventure is his middle name, without a doubt.
Okay.
And but I don't always necessarily want to do that. And so we found benefit, though, in, like, giving the other person what they need. And like, he gets solo trips with some friends. I get some trips with my, friends or by myself. Every year for my birthday, I've started this since I became a parent. Every year for my birthday, I take a weekend alone by myself. I rent an Airbnb somewhere. If I can, it's usually someplace close to my best friend. She lives about 2 hours from me. Because her and I will always have dinner on Friday night. And then I'll go to my Airbnb. And then I will sit there the whole weekend, and I'll sleep in. If I want to work on a special project, I will. If I just want to listen to music, I will. I'll do whatever the heck I want for the whole weekend. And it's a beautiful thing. And I'm always trying to, like, encourage moms to do that. Because I'm grateful, because my birthday and Mother's Day are always, like, usually the same week.
Oh, okay.
So that's what I do. And then I'll usually on Sunday afternoon, I'll come home, and then that way I spend a little bit of Mother's Day with my kids. And but we have found, like, the things that he needs, I make sure that he has, and the things that I need, he makes sure that I have.
Yeah,
and so, the biggest thing is definitely trust. Like, you have to trust your partner, because if you don't, then you can't trust them to do things on their own. You can't trust, you know what I mean? And that's miserable anyway. That's miserable for everyone.
Yeah.
So, no, we don't have to worry about that. So, thankfully.
That's a beautiful thing. Yeah.
It is. It is.
Quite a turnaround story.
Huge
experience. Oh, and I can certainly understand when you come through the kind of story you've come through, because it had tremendous trauma. and a long, slow, one step at a time journey out of that experience.
Mm-hmm.
A few things happen when you go through something like that. One of the things
Mm-hmm.
that happens, and this, I've seen this over and over again in the interviews I've done over the years, is that despite the fact that you obviously would never want to go through it again, almost everybody who goes through something like that says, I'm so glad I did because of all that I got out of it. And you're nodding your head. You're confirming it.
Oh, 1,000%. It's like, nobody makes it through this life without taking some hits. I mean, no one.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm going to take some hits, then I'm glad they're hits that I can use to help other people.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like back to that purpose thing, it's like everybody wants to know the purpose. Your purpose is serving other people.
That's the second thing that comes out of all these interviews. Thing. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it's like figuring out how to take the worst things that have happened in your life and use them for good and use them to serve other people. That's the beauty right there. That's it.
Well,
and
for people who have been through stuff like this, that's the fun part.
It is. It's a thing. I mean, serving other people, it's not just about them. You have no idea what it does for you and your soul. Like, it's just, it makes everything that you've been through worthwhile.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And that's when that leads to, I'm grateful that I went through that now.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you find that. So yeah, I wouldn't want anything different now.
So
Not at all.
I remember the first time I heard that, and it was from my friend Joel, the one who was he was my 12th interview back in 2012 when I first started the podcast.
Oh, so I'm going to go back and listen to that.
And yeah, it just kind of continued. But I remember the first time he told me about this, and I remember being, flummoxed, like, how could your worst trauma be the one thing you would never want to give up more than anything else in your life? But over time, I've come to appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
But the initial reaction is, well, that's insane. Who would want that?
Exactly. Yeah. And you don't, it does sound insane until you actually start doing it. And you're like, oh no, I totally get it.
It also, it sounds insane until you think about it for a while too. Because like I said, I've had a lot of conversations with my friend Joel.
Sure.
Plus I've done a lot of interviews over the years, hundreds of them. And over time, as the pattern starts to play out, you begin to realize the truth behind it. The truth behind the proposition that even though you would never want to go through it again, it was the biggest learning experience. It's where the greatest growth came from. It's where all of the springboard came from that led to the later part of life. That was such a great part of life. I mean, you start to see it over and over again, and you realize, yeah, okay, there is a truth to that. There is a value to that. And while we don't want to go through traumas like that, and we certainly don't wish them on anybody, that's how we can end up finding value in them, in something that seems on the surface to have no value in it.
Yep. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. So yeah, I know. It would be so nice though if we could just, this was a perfect world and nobody had to go through anything, but that's just not the case.
Well, I do think that you don't have to go through major trauma, but
oh, sure.
But certainly, I mean, and traumas are going to be different for different people. I mean,
exactly.
You went through a trauma that I think most people would agree was absolutely horrific, and there are probably many people who've been through much lesser traumas that say, "Well, mine doesn't really, measure up to that one." But
but that's not fair either.
Because the point is that a trauma is a trauma.
Yeah.
I mean,
whether it's big T or little t, that's what we say.
Yeah. I mean, you can put whatever number on it that you want to, but it's still a trauma.
It's exactly right. It still leaves an imprint on your brain, whether it's big or little. Yeah. And, I have a client right now who is constantly beating herself up because she's like, I know what I'm going through is not as heavy as what other people are going through. And I'm like, quit comparing. That's not, what do they say? Comparison is the thief of joy. That is 1,000% true. But it's, it's like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how it affected you. That's the thing. That's the thing we got to tackle. And, it's comparing yourself doesn't serve anybody. It's definitely not serving you.
And to me,
It's
there's a
tearing you
point
up.
to a great benefit. The great benefit that comes out of it is when we realize that it's not the level of trauma that matters, that becomes the gateway to understanding that it's not just a major trauma that we can learn from. We can get benefit from the smallest of traumas.
Yep.
What the major traumas do for us is they teach us, assuming that we survive them, they teach us, here's how you get through trauma, here's how you learn from them, and here's how you benefit from them. And now you can do it regularly, even on the smallest ones that come along the way. So you have a rotten conversation with the cable company. It's a pretty small trauma by comparison, but now you can navigate it. Now you know how to handle it and how to get benefit out of it instead of being pissed off about it all the time.
Exactly. That's exactly right. That's exactly it. And so I agree with everything you just said. So, I'm like telling people, just stop comparing your trauma to somebody else's. Just, it's like I said, it doesn't serve you. And then that's also not going to get you to where you want to be, because now you're beating yourself up for it. And there's no growth that happens when you're still sitting here beating yourself up. So let's figure out how we're going to move forward.
Yeah.
And because, I give this example too. There could be two people who experience the exact same trauma together. One of them develops PTSD, has a whole bunch of issues after that. The other one learns how to grow from it. No PTSD. So it doesn't serve you to compare yourself to somebody else's, because your brain didn't process things the same way that theirs did. And so, there's multiple factors on why these things happen, but it's irrelevant, honestly, because what we want to focus on is, okay, this is what happened. This is how we're going to overcome it. And so we're going to do this step by step, and we're going to get there. Because, honestly, most of the things that you need to do to overcome mental health is changing the automatic behaviors that happen with the positive things that you got to replace them. It's repetition. It's habit. It's like anything else. So once you start building up those habits and things start changing, that's when your life starts changing.
And the way I like to think about that is I like to kind of flip the concept around. So instead of being a person who compares, like, my trauma isn't as big as somebody else's trauma or whatever, instead of doing that, when you leave that whole game behind and replace it with what I call the appreciation game, appreciating what I'm getting out of all these different experiences, then you end up with an entirely different realm. You end up in a realm where anything that you go through, you'll find a way to appreciate. And the appreciation ends up creating the one thing that you wanted all along, a happy life.
That's exactly right. And it's so funny, because the very first thing that I typically always do with clients, very first thing, is to teach them how to do a gratitude journal. And I always tell people, they're like, it seems like the simplest thing. I have one lady tell me, she's like, that's stupid. And I'm like, I'm telling you,
so simple as something that is simple.
Exactly. And I always tell them, you give me 30 days. You promise me you're going to do it for at least 30 days. And I don't care if it's only one thing that you can find to be grateful for that day. And it just might be breathing. Write it down. And now it's time to put down at least one win. But the thing is, they don't realize is that they're training the brain to start looking for those things.
That's right.
And so now they look at their journal and they're like, oh man, I wrote down like 7 wins and 10 things to be grateful for today. Awesome. And it changes that was it. It is. It's something so little and so simple. But that was one of the big things for me, because I was always looking at the negative.
Sure.
And now it's like, I'm always in a good mood. I actually am very annoying to some people. I'm like, I'm sorry.
You're not annoying to me. Just saying. I just want you to know.
I appreciate that. But, it's like, so obviously there's some times that I try not to be overly optimistic, but it does. Over time, it completely shifts the way that you think, because your brain has been trained now to look for the things to be grateful for. And so that's for your audience. Try it. Don't knock it till you try it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
As so often happens when we have these conversations, I look at the clock and I say, how can it be an hour?
I know.
It flies. Well, it absolutely flies.
You're a professional conversation person.
Well, it also helps when we have a good dynamic going on. Because we have a lot of good stuff to talk about here.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I very much appreciate this podcast for sure. And I'm going back to listen to that podcast with your friend too, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. There are a few things I like to finish up each episode with. One of them I actually can't do because I normally turn to my co-host, because I normally have a co-host doing the show with me, and I ask her to basically kind of tie the whole thing together, because Anne Marie in particular, who normally does these shows with me on Monday, is a former listener who became a co-host. And
that's awesome.
She has the listener's perspective. So I asked her, okay, from the listener's perspective, tie together this conversation. What are you taking away from it? But I can't really do that because I'm not a listener of my own podcast.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. Maybe she could do it after the fact.
She might end up doing it later.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. But
that's awesome.
But so I have to leave that one alone. But one of the things that I do want to bring in that is important, you mentioned how you got into coaching and you were kind of brought into it by somebody saying, well, maybe you could help me, that kind of thing. And it just turned into something, as well as being a public speaker and so forth. It occurs to me so often that after I've had these great conversations, that there might be somebody listening who actually wants to reach out to you. We should probably tell them how to find you. So let's tell people how to find you.
Absolutely. Well, the easiest thing is just to go to my website, which is just amaptohope.com. That's all it is, maptohope.com. You can find everything there. But if I'm on all the socials at a map to hope, easy enough to find me. You can literally find me from anything. So, but if you go to the website, you can find all the socials on there, as well as coaching information and keynote speaking and things like that. So, but yeah, that's all there. So, and I'm going to start doing, I have one free resource on there about how to begin a mental health journey, which is really nice, because the thing a lot of people struggle with who are dealing with mental health issues is how to get started, because it seems overwhelming. And when we're overwhelmed, we don't act. So I try to make a really simple, little just PDF that they can look at to help them get the things they need to start healing. But I want to start doing more and more resources for people. So, because, coaching, it can be expensive for some people. And I'm going to start doing group coaching too in the fall, which is going to be really nice, because it's more it kind of kills two birds with one stone, because it's more cost efficient, but then also there's that community aspect. Yeah. So it's a beautiful thing. But yeah, so just go to amaptohope.com and we'll be there. So
beautiful. So anyway, that would be the second thing. The final thing that I like to do at the end of each episode is something I started a few years ago, because we've mentioned a few times now how, for instance, 20 years ago, we couldn't be doing the things that we're doing now. You and I would not be able to do this conversation. Right. You're in West Virginia, I'm in Connecticut. That this would not be possible 20 years ago.
Exactly.
It's possible now, which is cool and it's great.
I know.
And because of social media and the modern tools, the websites and the blogs and all this other kind of stuff, people like you are going out and they're saying, well, okay, I've got this mission now. I want to share. I want to help other people. I want to give back. I want to do whatever I can. And so you're putting out content and you're doing podcasts and you're sharing all the stuff that you can share everywhere. And you're being compensated for some of it, but a lot of it you're just putting out because it's important to put out there.
Exactly.
And that's where I noticed that there's a new phenomenon that we kind of skip over, which is people putting out all stuff like that, helping people they don't even know about, and nobody ever really notices. And I said, you know what? We should do something about that. So, Jen, on behalf of those people you've never met, never seen, never will meet, never will see, who you've been helping in ways you don't even know about by sharing your story, by sharing your truths, your ideas, the things that you've learned along the way, on their behalf, thank you for what you're doing, because you're making a difference in this world.
Well, thank you. And same to you. Thank you for doing this podcast. It's a beautiful thing, and trying to help people get that thing that everybody's looking for, which is to just be happy. And that's a beautiful thing, because we need more happy in this world, and we need to help as many people as we can get to that happy. So, and I love that you're bringing so many different perspectives and avenues and ways to reach people with that. So thank you to you too.
Thank you very much. And you asked before we got started, what was the main goal? And I told you that the subtitle is Your Daily Dose of Happy. So thank you for helping us achieve the Daily Dose of Happy.
Absolutely. And thank you again for having me. I had a blast. So I very much appreciate it.
Well, keep doing your wonderful work. We look forward to hearing more and more about it. And, just the best to you, your husband, your family going forward. Yeah, good stuff.
Thank you very much, Walt.
And thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.